So Blaine?
Oh, no.
He's back.
Blaine, are you in airport prison cell? Just want to check.
They talked about it. We sat down. We had a few questions. Frank exchange of perspectives.
Right.
And now I'm good.
Shoes.
Yeah, there might be a locker somewhere in this airport where there's a few TSA individuals, but I'm not going to.
Is President Trump destroying any chances of holding on to Congress and the Senate in the midterms? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. Sign up for my free newsletter and links to the guests in the description below. Hey, Susan. Hey, Blaine. Thank you so much for making yourselves available, guys.
Hi there.
Great to be here.
Yes, I love talking to both of you. I learned so much from both of you and really, really appreciate it. And we have the midterms happening in November, and it looks like it's over. Trump's revolution, his whole project to bring about the American system of political economy is falling apart. With all these scandals, ICE and Epstein files and no arrests and his bombast and his mean tweets. Or should it be bombast? But anyway, Blaine, I'm going to start off with you. He's failing badly all over the place, is he not?
So says the gentleman from the other side of the pond.
Listen. Whatever you say, I'm not going to tolerate any sort of argument that suggests that Keir Starmer isn't a political giant working for the betterment of the British people.
Well, then I guess we're going to get to see what you not tolerating something looks like. So here's where we're at. I think really right now strategically we're at a Y in the roads. And the only one who knows how this is going to go is really President Trump. And I mean the only one, not inner circle, not chief of staff. You know, he told me this one time 3 years ago. I got the opportunity to be at Mar-a-Lago and have dinner next to him. And he just basically told me about his NATO strategies back in 2016. He's like,
no, hold on, Blaine. Hold on a second. Because the following day, I saw him as well. And he said to me, yeah, you never believe what I told that Blaine guy.
Yeah. And then the following day, he said, I got with Rich and I told him this, but I didn't mean it. So,
well, just a bit of credibility for people who don't know. Blaine is retired U.S. Air Force retired brigadier general. At one point, you were second in command to General Petraeus, responsible for logistics, and also you were second in command for NATO the U.S. contingent to NATO at one point.
So to keep it honest, I was one of General Petraeus' base commanders during the war, and I was the deputy military rep to NATO. So here's the why in the roads that I was talking about. Either we're on a real bad path towards those midterms, and the ones that I blame are not President Trump at all or his strategy. The ones that I blame are the fake Republican Party members who are supposed to be of the president's party, backing him up every step of the way, who've done really nothing but undermine our president every month he's been in office. And so we can go into that later.
Are you referring to people in his cabinet or people in Congress?
I'm talking about the Republican Party in Congress has not carried what the people mandated to be voting for. The people's agenda is what the GOP is pushing back on, or the Republicans. They haven't codified one of the president's executive orders. They have held up most of his nominees in the judicial side. They are not helping get to the SAVE Act, which would give us a much better way of election integrity and accountability. That's kind of where the battlefield sits. And so let's just say, here, I'll throw out a heady term, ceteris paribus, all things being equal, if nothing changes, we're on our way to the Republicans gladly handing power over in the midterms to the Democrats so that they can impeach him a year from now. And if they get a big enough majority, that conviction will stick. So now that's one path. The other path, the one that I pray for every night and hope for, it would be the one that President Trump has all to himself in his head right now, which is there's going to be something in the next 120 days before the politics really drives out all the oxygen in the room, that really gets us to what most Americans have been craving, and that is a season of accountability for all of the criminals, and I don't just mean the elected ones, in DC that have co-opted and sold off our republic in parts and pieces to foreign interests and domestic interests all over, and basically co-opted our Constitution, our civil rights. This nation wants to see accountability for those things. And so if there's going to be a massive season of accountability with massive amounts of judicial process, whether it's military or in the civilian lines, then I think that's what America voted for. That's what America wants to see. The swamp is going to be tamed, and you would see President Trump on his way, driving his agenda to a very good place. But right now, I think, and I don't know how Susan will feel about this, is most of us are just on the edge of our damn seats, going, "Wow, what's going to happen next?"
Well, I think about accountability in a different way, because there's obviously a lot of criminals. There are obviously a lot of idiots, and worse in the U.S. Congress. But if you look at what Marco Rubio said in Munich, he said something very important, which relates to the domestic side of this. He said the deindustrialization was a conscious policy decision. That is really important, because I think as angry as people have become, whipped up over all of the crap that's gone on in terms of the deep state and, corruption and evil and so on, I think they're actually more angry and not capable of expressing it to what has happened to our country over the past 30, 40, 50 years. And when Rubio said that, the light bulbs went on in my head, and I said, okay, we know where this started. In 1977, the Council on Foreign Relations released a report. It was a whole series of reports. It was called Project 1980s. And it was their investigation of, okay, we've ended the Bretton Woods system. We're on our way toward globalization. Of course, World Economic Forum, founded, I guess, in 1972 or 71. How are we actually going to implement this now in the United States and elsewhere? So they wrote a whole series of books called Project 1980s. Many of the leading people who wrote those books and did those studies ended up staffing the Carter administration. Secretary of State, right? Basically it was a blueprint for the Carter administration. But in there, I think there was a very, very important admission, which gets us back to Marco Rubio. In there, they said, we're going to have a problem selling this to countries because they don't want to give up their manufacturing. They don't want to give up their economic independence. Therefore, the controlled disintegration of the world economy is a legitimate objective. That's a quote from one of the books from the Council on Foreign Relations back in the 1970s. And that's what people have been living through for the past 50 years. The deliberate disintegration of our economies and, of course, our society with it, because the destruction of manufacturing, industry, middle class, working class, the destruction of jobs where one income can raise a family, which is like a fantastical dream for most people in their 20s today, thinking about that. But this was a conscious policy. And I think where a lot of the other anger about justice and accountability comes from is that people, have been forced to live in this world where they feel relatively helpless and hopeless. Or as Scott Bessent said, the Democratic strategy is to compensate the loser. You're an economic loser, and we're going to throw some money at you to pacify you. But ultimately people just don't like that. So I think there is anger, but I think it's more deep-seated than most people know. And that it really is the fact that our society as a whole, economically and culturally and socially, not to mention, this from the standpoint of the legal side, has been consciously under attack, which is why I think Rubio's speech was so important It was important on many fronts. It was an extraordinary speech. But that phrase right there, where he said this was a conscious policy decision, this was done voluntarily, it wasn't a mistake. I think that's extremely important. And I think what can crack open the midterms is that if we make that conscious to working Americans, young Americans, what you have lived through pretty much your entire life was done to you deliberately by this globalist system. And yes, all the evil and disgusting and perverted elites who run it, but it's the system. I think that's where you really need to get the desire for justice and accountability. We have to bring down this damn system, because you can throw all the Roman centurions in jail as you want, but if you aren't going to bring down the Roman Empire, you're going to be right back where you started, again. So I think this question of the deliberate destruction of our economy and the fact that this administration is saying we know it's deliberate and we're reversing it. And we're reversing it with actual American system policies. Go back to Jameson Greer's lecture to Davos, Hamiltonian economics that most people have forgotten. I think that if we can figure out how to make this much more of the political discussion in this country, it's going to address the really deep-seated anger. I think it morphs into this other anger, and I think the Psy warriors are trying to divert the anger into Epstein, into these other things. There is anger. There should be anger. A bunch of criminal financial parasites have destroyed the lives of hundreds of millions of people in the United States, and for that matter, the rest of the world, but we're talking about the midterms. And you don't have to accept it any longer if you understand that that's what's really making you angry. That's how I'm coming at it.
Right. And what that points to is people vote with their pocketbook. If people have the experience that we're better off economically, financially under Trump, then they'll vote for Trump.
And, they're starting to bring in the receipts. Apparently, there was a strategy session between people in the White House and I guess some people on Capitol Hill the last couple of days. I just saw passing coverage of it, so I'm not speaking with a great deal of detailed knowledge of it. But it was around the question of the midterm strategy, and they just came down very hard. It is the economy. And I think you're starting to see it. If you look at Peter Navarro the other day, went after Jamie Dimon. He said, "I'm talking to you, Jamie, you SOB. You are a usurious thief." I mean, this is on national television, right? Because because JP Morgan, doesn't want to drop interest rates from usury, which is 30%, to 10%, which is frankly still usurious, because their Ponzi scheme will collapse. Yeah. And Navarro just pulled him out. Or then I just saw a headline this morning, and again, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but the thumbnail for one of Maria Baratiromo's shows was $17 trillion in investment, and it was an interview with the head of the National Association of Manufacturers. So I think you're going to start seeing they're going to come out much, much, much more with the messaging in terms of we are actually taking our country back. We're taking our economy back. And this is the future that we're outlining for you. And again, I can't overestimate how important it is. I think that Rubio said it was deliberate. This is not just a result of free market forces and, suck it up and you're going to have to live with it because that's the way the world works. No, this was a deliberate policy to wipe you out and destroy you. And, when I look at the outrage over the Epstein files and so on, I also say, well, how about the outrage of all the families that were destroyed when their factories shut down? Their teenage daughter ended up addicted to crack cocaine and ended up, pimping herself out and ultimately dying. How many tens of thousands of families, if not hundreds of thousands of families, has that happened to since NAFTA because of the system? And that's where, the system is evil, but it's the system that's evil. So of course, evil people run it. But guess what? Just getting rid of the evil people is not going to get rid of the evil system.
Yeah. Blaine?
Yeah, I think it's, I agree with everything Susan just said, but I think it's both. If these little urchins are left unscathed, City of London types don't go quietly in the night. They've been around for thousands of years. And if this fight isn't taken to the people as well, we can destroy the system, but much like a weed in your garden, it's coming back. And I don't think there should be any partitioning about who should be outraged, because whether you lost everything because COVID took out 300,000 small businesses, or NAFTA sent your factory job that was going to send your kid to college overseas, all of it merits the outrage it has, including the absolute egregiousness and the perversions wrapped up in that Epstein list. But the Epstein list is not just about the elites and sexual perversion. It's about far more than that. This clown was at the center of everything. I believe that he did work for the City of London, through the MI6 Bureau and Mossad and all of the above. And he had multitudes of strategies. This is what's so exciting about today. We now have the veil being lifted on all of this stuff. Now, there's outrage, but there's something else. There's another temperament that's in the nation right now. Fear. Because the people who elected Donald Trump may be a little irritated about accountability maybe not going in the direction they'd like it to go. And can you ever blame angry villagers with pitchforks and knives? I wouldn't. But the other emotion that's pervasive is fear, because people understand that if Trump falls, if they impeach him next year, we're in trouble. We're in real trouble. And many people, I talk to many people, some that are guests on this podcast a lot, about what does that world look like? What do we have to prepare for? Because, if they lost their grip on power for 2 fleeting years of Trump trying to battle them, the Biden years will seem very kind. The COVID years will seem very kind compared to what they'll have in store for us, should they be able to get their footing and get back up on step.
Okay. Well, I want to go back to something you said earlier, Blaine, which is about the people who've committed crimes being held to account and being charged and convicted. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about the Russiagate hoaxers. And Tulsi Gabbard has been quietly collecting evidence about Obama and Brennan and all the others who were involved in what essentially was an attempted coup against an elected US president, and spawned out of the City of London.
Yes. And then when that failed, followed up with a stolen election. And Tulsi is taking the lead on both those things. Right. But now take a look at the cause and effect. The 700 ballot boxes and serious evidence gets rolled up out of Fulton County, Georgia. And magically, some government agency releases a bunch more Epstein files with stuff about President Trump and all the others. You're seeing a civil war inside the United States power structure. This is deep state versus Trump. And so I'm always encouraged when I see things like this, just like Christine Lagarde giving up her post over at the ECB. It means that the bad guys are not confident. It means that they're reacting. And when you're reacting, that means you're not in your plan. When you're not in your plan, it means I can defeat you. Much easier than if I had to take apart your strategy, which, by the way, was marinated over the last 70, 80 years. So this is why I caution people. Wars can go in a bunch of different directions. I believe that we are going to learn something very soon, and we're going to see some very big moves on the board soon. And I don't say that because I get insights into what President Trump's thinking. I say that because I'm watching the clock. And the clock is unforgiving. It is unemotional, and it is moving towards November. And I get that we're tearing down a system. Part of that system is people. And if the people are left alone, we got a problem. I just don't see it going down that way.
Okay, so what I think you're hinting at is that the administration are going to do what they can to clean up. They have to clean up the elections so that we can have clean,
that's minimum.
elections.
That's job number one. And I've been told through sources that is absolutely job number one. And if the Republicans don't want to help him, he's going to go. He'll go to an executive order and ensure that we're just not going to be using stupid voting machines. And we're fighting this in the Supreme Court right now. Harmeet Dillon is in the Supreme Court. She just concluded her arguments that election day in our Constitution says day, not days, not plural. You can't do this over a series of days because that's when the shenanigans starts going. So, and then you've got the NAACP and these folks down in Atlanta, Georgia, that did all the shenanigans in the stolen 2020 election, and they're fighting tooth and nail to throw out all the evidence because they know a lot of them are on their way to jail. But even if we don't have the great roundup, as I would call it, of folks who really do need to wear orange jumpsuits at a minimum, then we have to clean up our election system so that the president can get at the Resolute desk and explain to the American people what's in play here.
Okay, Susan.
Well, I think it's it's obviously a multi-front strategy. The only problem I have with the accountability question in terms of all the criminals is we're not in control of the courts at this point. We don't even have a chance of being in control of the courts unless Trump takes the midterms and he gets a Congress which has got some balls and will actually start passing, approving some of his district attorneys and judges and so on. So we can arrest all the people we want in 2026,
right.
And their cases are going to get thrown right out of court, and then people are going to be even more demoralized. So
right.
I think the administration is very conscious of this, and they know that you have to be very deliberate. You have to be airtight. You cannot grandstand. If anybody's ever been through one of these, and we certainly have, you're on enemy territory. And often the best you can do is just hold your ground if you can even do that. So that's how I see that side of it. There are obviously a lot of moves on election integrity. We're going to see what the Supreme Court does in terms of the Voting Rights Act and redistricting. That could end up being a fairly big game changer in terms of, states redistricting in time so that we pad our margins. But I always come back to 2024, where we had as much election integrity in place as we could, but, it was still pretty much in enemies' hands, especially in the big urban areas like Detroit here. And yet we still won. And I always come back to Michigan and I come back to Wayne County because, the fact that they called Michigan early, relatively early. I don't mean 7:00, but it wasn't 4 days after the election like the last time, right?
Right.
Is because we had such a surprising margin here in Wayne County among the Muslim Americans in Dearborn and Hamtramck, among the blue collar workers in Downriver where I am, that at a certain point, the people who were sitting there with all the phony absentee ballots said, "Holy crap, we don't have enough to do this." And they threw in the towel, and Michigan went for Trump. And, pretty much that was all she wrote. So, I always operate from the standpoint, whatever we get in place on election integrity, and it's going to be better than we had in 2024 because of whatever actions Trump can make. Maybe we can get the SAVE Act if we burn enough of these Republican senators' butts. And maybe not just burning them. I'm sure there's some interesting conversations going on in some back rooms in terms of these senators saying, we know what you did, so maybe you better vote for the president. I think they're going to have to get very, very hardball as far as this goes. But even if we got nothing, I think you fight the fight from the standpoint of, all right, well, what do we have to do to overwhelm all of that? And then whatever you get is going to be gravy. And I'm absolutely convinced, again, because being in the middle of this on the ground in a swing state like Michigan, The message is the economic message. And if that can start getting out with much greater clarity, and again, not just, oh, your 401k is doing better. Well, honestly, most of the voters who switched over to Trump from the Democratic Party probably don't even have 401ks. But what they want is a good paying job where they can take care of their family. And they will vote for Donald Trump if they have the sense that that is in the future, if not immediately before them. That's the messaging that I think needs to be sharpened. And I think it needs to be sharpened from the standpoint of, yes, these SOBs did this to you deliberately, and we are reversing it.
Okay. What's your sense, Susan? Because you're out on the ground meeting people at campaign stalls and stuff for Promethean Action, getting people to register as Republicans, I imagine, and putting the word out. What's the vibe now compared to how it was before Trump got elected for his second term?
Well, you know, the people who have voted for Trump in the past have been subjected for the past year, more or less, but with a greater intensity, I'd say, for the past 3 to 4 months, as the elites realize, hey, we're not going to stop Trump from doing what he's doing. He is steamrolling ahead with tariffs, with peace, with changing the direction of the economy. He's using executive orders. He doesn't give a damn that he's got a bunch of lunkheads in the Congress at this point. I mean, it would be better if he didn't. But, they came to a decision, I think, a couple of months ago. All right, this man is not going to be stopped in terms of reshaping the U.S. economy, taking it out of the grip of the City of London and everything that represents. That's the point at which they said we have to demoralize his base. And that's when Epstein, when, all the crap. And when you see these so-called pro-MAGA influencers suddenly flipping like Tucker and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon half the time he's okay, half the time he's not, where they suddenly flip and they will not talk about a single thing that Trump is doing to achieve peace or to create an economic revolution. All they can talk about is what he isn't doing. And that's when you saw the psychological warfare go into high gear. And I think hopefully we're kind of at the apex of the impact of that psychological warfare. And I think the administration knows it. And that we have to begin to get our narrative out there much more dramatically, so that people are focused on the real world and what's at stake in this election. Because as Blaine said, if the Democrats win, you take COVID, you take NAFTA, you take every horrible economic event that's happened in the past 40 years, put them in one bucket, supercharge them, and that's what we're going to be faced with. And I don't know that the United States will survive if that happens. People have to get the sense of you literally do have two choices before you. You have a dark age or you have a genuine renaissance. But you've got to put legs on the renaissance. You can't just say, renaissance. It's not a question of looking at beautiful pictures, although we should have more classical music and classical art in our society. But to make it very visceral, that it really is a choice between a dark age and a human future for all mankind. I think we got to lift the discussion up a lot more than it has been.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. I'm always an eternal and insufferable optimist. I am. But, we told some Trump team members this. You'll have to be a little more sympathetic to the American people because we all bought tickets on this roller coaster. We don't know where the roller coaster goes or how many loops it's going to take to go upside down. And we can see real peril and the potential for accidents in this roller coaster. And we're not driving. We don't get to drive this. But to be very fair, there is no alternative. There is no better plan. There is no other way then we're going to have to trust the man. That doesn't, and to be quite honest, they do take criticism, they do take in feedback, they do take in advice about, do you know this? But what's also tough is, because of the amount of security and communications around the administration, you can inject advice and observations, but you're never going to get information back. And actually, as a military guy, that makes me feel pretty good. I want them to have secure comms. I don't want, loose lips do sink ships. And this is for all the marbles. This is for all the marbles. He is literally taking his sword to the heart of the beast, the real beast, not the fake ones. That's what this war on the cartels is about. This is the vascular system to all of that. And so, how does it turn out? I am certain, when I have flown my C-17, and I've had to drop oxygen masks for the passengers in the back, and we were battling an avionics fire up there, I am certain they were wondering, gee, I sure hope that major has what it takes in his brain to get this thing on the ground. I am certain that they did, because they don't get to come up the stairs and fly the airplane. Well, guess what? The president's flying the airplane. Right. Thank goodness it's not Kamala Harris, because if it was Kamala Harris, we'd already be done. And I'd be having this conversation with you from Uruguay.
I haven't chosen my country yet.
Yeah. No, I've got what I call, Susan, a swimsuit competition. It's down to about 4 or 5, and I'm going to go visit a few of them. But to, tongue in cheek, honestly, it is okay, and it is proper, and it is an American trait to bitch, moan, and gripe anytime we see things are not correct. And at the same time, we need to hold back. And I think this is where Susan's counsel is. You need to withstand judgment in total, because there's so much we can't see, and so much more to come on this windy, twisty roller coaster that we're on.
Okay. Well, the opposition in Congress, the Republican opposition in Congress, who are they? Are they captured by the City of London? Do they disagree with Trump ideologically because the Orange Man bad?
No, it's not like they get a phone call from, the head of the Bank of England every day. But it's the way that the political structure has been managed, for decades and decades and decades. To get elected to Congress, you basically have to kiss the ring of the people who run the system. Now, it's starting to change a little bit. Obviously, we've got some small number of people in Congress who actually support the president, and will help magnify what he is trying to say. We need more of those. But again, from being on the ground, I can tell you how hard it is to get a MAGA candidate who actually understands what Trump is doing, who then would get enough money to actually win a congressional race. That is hard. We will get a few more of those in this cycle if we do our job right, I believe. The minimum is to hang on simply with Republicans in the House and in the Senate, because then in the second term, Trump can start legislating more. Because again, it's pretty, except for the one big beautiful bill, which was frankly a miracle, that they got it through, and it had as many important things in it as it had. Once you start actually legislating these fundamental substantive changes, I think you're going to see a much better class of congressmen, stepping forward by 2028. But it's just really this question of completely changing the narrative, because the way we elect congressmen, the way we elect everything, is just this controlled donor class, consultant class, kind of operation. And honestly, Trump knows he can't throw all of that out the window all at once, because you'll just end up with Democrats taking some of these seats. So he's going to have to live with some of the people who we all hold our nose when we see them, like Lindsey Graham, right? Because he's looked at the situation on the ground and he says, all right, we don't have what it takes to actually take down one of these rhinos, replace it with a MAGA candidate who could actually win, will actually get enough money to win because you need the donor class to buy in to a certain degree. There is no such thing as a grassroots funded congressional campaign. No such thing. Maybe you get down to the state legislative level, you could do it grassroots. You cannot do it in this day and age in Congress. So he's dealing with this very complex political geometry. He's making his decisions in terms of who he has to support and what he has to do. So the way I approach it is we just have to marginally move the needle with more MAGA people in 2020, after 2026, holding the Congress and getting a few more MAGA people in there. But as long as he holds the Congress and the Senate, he goes all guns for the last 2 years. You see an even more rapid fire transformation of this economy. Then by 2028, we can say, okay, we can call the shots in terms of who we actually want to run for Congress, and they will be pure MAGA. But I mean, I know where I am in Michigan in 2026, and we ain't there yet.
Blaine?
I agree. Listen, it's going to be threading a needle. It's going to be close.
Yeah.
but I do think no matter what, we're going to see something of enormous event size in the next 3 months. Could be financial, could be a roundup, could be the war that gets stopped, and that creates a bunch of tumblers. It could be a lot of things, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see, and we'll be talking about it here.
Yep, and it could be in more Epstein papers being released. It could also be, I'm going to be mischievous now. All right, prepared. Whether Blaine and Susan should run for Congress, let us know in the comments below.
I'll be her campaign manager.
And should they run as Democrats or not?
We have one candidate in my family. My husband is running for state rep.
Okay, okay.
That's enough.
That's enough.
Go Kokinda.
Blaine, Susan, thank you so much. I so enjoy these conversations. And actually, I'm going to say this right. I really, really appreciate what you provide. You know, in terms of your analysis, your commentary, what I learn from you and what all the people who are watching this learn from you. So if you value that as well, then please put a comment, Susan and Blaine for president.
Thank you both. I always enjoy these.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Look forward to doing this again in about a month's time.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.